Huh?
Listen to this. Amy County Barrett, 2 years in private practice. Never tried a case, never argued an appeal, never argued before the Supreme Court. Most private work involves civil cases, not criminal cases. 15 years as a teacher. Never served as a judge until 2017. That is just, on top of everything else, it's fucking atrocious.
Fastest appointment ever, right?
And the only appointment since like 1869 that's not had one vote from a major minority party, and never before confirmed, 8 days before an election.
Yep.
Thank you, Bruce. Next up, we have Peter Wall.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for taking my call. I guess we all do business all the time. I'm actually one of the residents that is most affected by this decision. So when you saw Scott Robinson's detail of his maps, they showed 10 townhouses, high-gated townhouses that are immediately east of Chun. If I went outside and made a snowball, but the snow's not good enough to make a snowball, I could probably throw a snowball and hit Chun. So we know all too well what it means from noise and all the other things, because we've heard they sponsored weddings and things of that nature. So the biggest concern from a practical perspective from neighbors, and I'm not here representing the HOA or any of the neighbors, I'm just representing myself, is the noise, the possible, we don't want a Blake Street kind of bar suddenly popping down next to us where they're playing cornhole till midnight and playing music. But we would love a place where we could go and have a coffee, a pastry for breakfast, a light lunch, maybe get a glass of wine for dinner. I'm a Colorado native, but I lived in New York City. They know how to do things in parks. And you can get a glass of wine in Central Park in New York, and it's wonderful. So the idea of being able to have a neighbor immediately
Wine.
who
Wine.
respect our privacy.
People are dying in the fucking streets, and he wants to talk about wine at the park.
Opportunity that I hope we don't give up. Just so you know, these townhouses weren't here 30 years ago. The reason they're here is because the city council agreed to close the High Street entrance into Cheeseman Park. And that rezoning allowed us to have this marvelous, marvelous home where we live on the park. And I think this is going to be a nice addition to exactly what we're looking for, is a great place to live. So I'm in favor of it. I can't speak for my neighbors, but I can tell you this, the developers negotiated in a good faith fashion the GNA. They really did. They came to the table, open arms, and we now have something I think we can live with. Again, I can't speak for my neighbors, but I think this is a wonderful idea. And I hope to be able to go get a glass of wine at our new neighbors sooner rather than later. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. We have Charles Newsome up. You might have to unmute there for Charles.
Hi, can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Charles Nussbaum. Thanks so much for letting me speak in support of the zoning change. I live in the 1400 block.
Want coffee and wine at the park, folks. Not toilets Definitely not toilets.
That long ago that we used to ride bikes over to the playground at Cheeseman and also to the special CSO concerts. It would have really been nice to stop along the way to or from, get a snack at Cheeseman Park. I think this is going to be an amazing game changer for so many people that are walking, riding, rolling, biking,
We're gonna feel good about Denver again.
to and from
Thank
the
you,
park,
Jesus.
to be able to meet with your friends, neighbors, colleagues, and to talk about anything or have small
I would
community
love
meetings.
somebody, the next person to come and ask
Many of
about
you
the next plans for Jen.
used to go to the People's Fair, and that's how John derived most of his income. Well, that's gone. We've gone to other fundraising efforts, and this is going to be an incredible partnership with amazing placemakers that we have to be proud of here in the city.
28 people, 28, 27 people
That
signed
really
up
want to
for
make
Golden
it
4,000.
special for everybody. And
4,000
minimize
subscribers.
any controversy,
Short,
any minimize the
28.
noise, minimize the parking.
Been floating right around that number for.
And I think that it's critical to
Yeah,
John's
I don't
mission
make a lot of money on
to
Facebook.
be able to share in the income from such a cafe in order to provide these critical services that have never been more pertinent.
Oh, but we're going to court in the morning, folks.
Their voices heard. I mean,
Yeah, I got a court date tomorrow.
advocacy and support is critical to so many, regarding licensing, homelessness, parking, safety, density, development, traffic, transportation.
No, there was
Preservation, walkability, bikeability, in general, accessibility.
There was a black
just
woman
to
on
name
there.
a few of the things that we're involved in. So if we don't have to take care of a historic mansion and can do that for the community while partnering with Sixth Street, I think it's a win-win for everybody, and I appreciate all the different points of view. I'm a member of the board, I'm a past president, and I am really hoping that the council will join in approving this zoning change, and that we can be an example for the rest of the city and the state and hopefully the nation. Many heartfelt thanks for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Our next speaker is James Hoover.
Hey, Morbid Angel, Jessica.
Good evening. My name is James Leroy. I'm the 1050 Sherman Street, Capitol. Been a Shedd board member since December 2019. I even got to attend
Have we been reading the
one
Denver budget?
meeting before the pandemic hit. For 5 years now, I've been living without a car. I walk.
What have you been reading about it?
It's really surprising that these
Things like
I really enjoy getting
massive cuts to unhoused programs,
I've probably backward background
things that
to
goes to support the and help
and
the
I'm looking
vulnerable,
forward to biking to
while
in-person
keeping
meetings
things
in the future.
like
Continuing my conversations with people after meetings with walks and coffee.
the payments
We
to
can't
organic
have too
gardens
many
and other
warm
things.
and welcoming
flat.
spaces in our community. And I'm
The
proud to
employee
be
staff
a
doesn't, their incomes don't change.
As a longtime practitioner,
I get that. Yeah, okay.
I have
So,
a vision for the future.
that's a
which is
big thing,
incredible.
cuts to the unhoused.
It contributes to the
And
nation
other
and
programs,
the best three
cuts into
centuries of
programs that
life.
help,
I'm impressed by
vulnerable.
the persistence and the positive energy change in the community. Over the
Movement
past 50
of
years,
personnel
that's why
from
I'm working on the Gregory project.
under,
So, I'm in favor of reasonability.
within the police department from civilian headcount.
Thank you so much for your time and attention today. I know the work that goes into balancing the
So
interests of the
eliminating
community.
civilian
I
positions
appreciate your time.
and then hiring in.
Thank you.
What
Debbie
kind of
Young is our
civilian
next
positions?
speaker.
If you pull up the budget, I can show you.
I'm right here.
Right. If I go to, is this for 2021? Yeah, click into the 2021.
Debbie, you might have to unmute yourself.
2021 PDF.
How's that?
Great, go ahead.
Right, okay, so good evening, and I know it's getting late, so I thank you for your continued time this evening. I live in the 600 block of Milwaukee, and I am speaking in favor of the rezoning proposal this evening. When my husband and I moved here not so long ago, we chose Congress Park because of its community feel with historic homes, mature trees, parks nearby, and mostly for its walkability. We've lived off and on in Europe and love the charm and community feel of their walkable cities and parks and cafes for neighbors to meet meet. So I, like many of the others, I walk around Cheeseman Park most days of the week. I love its beauty, which includes the iconic architecture of the historic Tears McFarland House. I love that this proposal will continue to protect that historic nature, and that the partners in Chun and the people that are building it are committed to restoring this grand home. I love the idea of a cafe adjacent to the north end of this great park, where I would be able to sit and enjoy a coffee or a tea with people in my community. Maybe when Peter Wells wants to be there and join for a glass of wine. I also understand that it's very expensive to restore historic homes, and I love that the idea of this simple cafe will help fund the much needed work to keep this beautiful house historic and iconic. So I'm in favor of the rezoning and request that Denver City Council approve the rezoning of 1290 William Street. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Patricia McHenry.
Hey folks, how we doing? How's Patricia tonight?
I live at 653 Ray Street, just south of Cheeseman Park. I am a principal with City Street Investors, and as you heard, we're partnering with CHAP. I and my City Street partners are passionate about old buildings, but even more so, we're passionate about reinvigorating historic properties and making neighborhoods better. You've already heard a lot about the extensive outreach that went on to identify the desired community, and we look forward to progress. Our tenant base is over 95% locally owned, and we've created over 20 different food and beverage operations. The casual cafe that we will bring to Tears McFarland will be an amazing amenity to the neighbors, including me. I would like to thank the city and the neighbors of McFarland.
It's definitely an increase in
Many
personnel.
months for this rezoning, creating the cafe concept and the good neighborhood. I urge you to approve this zoning application.
Thank you. Next up, we have Ian Tafoya.
Hello, Council. My name is Ian Thomas Tafoya. I reside in District 2, but I formerly lived in City Park West for about 7 years. I am a Chun member still because I work in the Capitol Hill area, and I am a former Chun board member. I am in support of this project because I believe it's reasonable in its scale to bring a much needed amenity to the community and to save this amazing historic property. Now, I am a historic Denver board member and trustee. I'm not speaking on their behalf tonight, but in this role, I've participated with Latinos and Heritage Conservation, where they're doing a similar project in Houston to save the original house of Whalen, the Union Wells. So I think this is innovative. This is something that's happening around the country. And I've thrown myself a birthday party here on the park. It's amazing to be able to have both of this available. So I'm in support. Thank you.
There's some offsets to like civilian
Thank you.
positions.
Our next speaker is
And then
Joe
it becomes
Bosworth.
uniformed, which means that DPD would have
More cops.
more cops,
Good
and more
evening.
union members.
Thank you, everyone. I will be extremely brief. I think so many positive things have been said already. I don't have much to add to it. I would, I guess I should say, my address is 1115 Tacoma Street, Denver. This has been a privilege for my partners at City Street Investors and I to work on this special project. And this is an example of a rezoning that was done correctly. Extensive community outreach, really custom crafting. Not only the zoning, but the specific uses for the property, and good neighbor agreement that we put together. Just an example of how to do this right. A couple of points I'd make about this, and then so we can move on is really just two. One is just want to remind everybody, this is a 50-50 partnership between City Street Investors and Capital United Neighbors, so it's innovative in that respect, that you have a nonprofit organization partnering with a for-profit organization in order to bring this project back to life.
Time to make
This
videos.
project was donated to the city
So we'll watch them, right?
by the owners
You're gonna have to find
decades
it.
ago with the specific
Thank
desire
you.
to be a community gathering.
And please tell your friend. Well, she got my email. I'm sorry that we didn't get
Has
to.
really hurt the property over the
They
years.
said-
Not figuring out
we
how
said
to
we were
keep it
going.
mutually sustainable.
All right.
So as a result, it has fallen into
We
disrepair.
didn't see you come off the
Chuck's done a
elevators.
yeoman's job of really
Waited up
keeping
there
it
for a minute, and
together,
I thought
but,
maybe they went downstairs.
it's
Oh
time.
yeah, I went all the way downstairs to the
And
basement to
this
the
sort
front
of
and,
And then they went down
private,
there and,
sorry.
partnership with a nonprofit
All right,
is
next
gonna
time.
allow us to bring sustainability, financial sustainability to the project so that the house can be restored to its former glory, and it can really fulfill the vision of being the community gathering place that was originally envisioned when the owners donated to the city some decades ago. So,
I'm
with
so
that,
excited to be here.
I just
I mean,
think the rezoning meets the
my
criteria.
council members are
Respectfully
so
request that,
well dressed today.
council approve,
None of
this
them are in
application.
pajamas
Thank
and
you, Madam
underwear.
President. Thank you, council members. We appreciate it.
None of my council members are in their pajamas and underwear, or are they? We wouldn't know because they're not here.
I will be brief. I have gained quite an appreciation.
Be brief.
For the time you folks spend in these meetings, and I understand we're just the first part of what you've got teed up here. My name's Megan Whalen. I reside at 520 Marion Street, and I'm also an owner of a small business in South City Park. I'm speaking today in support of the rezoning of the Tears McFarland property. I was born here in Denver and have lived near Cheeseman Park for most of my life. My dad taught us kids how to play softball in the park. I've just got so many fond memories, and I've walked and run the park trails more times than I can catalog. Several years ago, I responded to an invitation to participate in a focus group about the future of the Tiers and the Annex and Capitol Hill United Neighborhood's role in the future of the property. I was excited to learn about the opportunity to create an amenity for park users that would be leveraged to provide resources to restore and maintain the Tiers house, which is a neighborhood
You're
jewel,
so
and
wanted
to
up
allow
there at the
it
property.
to remain in the hands of Chun.
That's what I should do.
When
Start selling booze out
when
my
was
front
asked
door
about
so that
my
I
park
could
use in the
heat my
focus
house.
group, I and most others reported that we walk, bike, or roll.
Can I
into
grow
the park,
mushrooms?
And I'm just delighted by the potential here
Just
to
can't eat them?
meet friends for coffee in the park that we all love. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. That concludes our speakers. Questions from members of council?
They're not alive because we can't see them. They're not here.
For a question for Mr. Robinson, there were 126 letters in support and 134 letters in opposition to planning board. Is that correct? And were those received before or after the Good Neighbor Agreement was signed? Okay, thank you. That's all I have. Thank you, Madam President.
All right, thank you, Councilman Hines. Seeing no other questions from members of council, the public hearing for Council Bill 29 is closed. Comments by members of council. Councilman Hines.
Thank you, Madam President. This is in District 10. I am very familiar with this property. I have been to this property many times, including both the historic building and the non-historic annex behind the building. I am excited that this rezoning will preserve and revitalize the historic structure while getting rid of the dilapidated structure behind the historic building. It's really dilapidated. I recognize that there were originally concerns about this rezoning, and I'm excited that Chun has heard those concerns of the neighbors and reflected those concerns in a signed Good Neighbor Agreement. The GNA stops amplified noise, it requires the place to close early, and has so many other options that provide a tasteful balance between the development and the property owners that are incredibly close by. I see Chun as a model RNO, and I'm happy that they continue to work with the community to be a good neighbor and to make our community stronger and better connected. This is definitely in line with my vision of the 20-minute neighborhood that I want so passionately for Denver's Perfect 10 and for all of Denver. I'm elated to personally know so many of those who testified tonight. It was a roll down memory lane to see and hear from so many of you. I feel comfortable saying that virtually
touch.
every neighborhood in Neighbors Perfect 10 were represented in testimony tonight. Finally, I am in favor of this rezoning as I believe.
Not like that, our babysitter's here.
And hope my colleagues support it as well. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Councilmember Hines, and seeing no other hands raised, I do agree, it meets all of the criteria, and it was just a pleasure, listening to folks.
It was just a pleasure
And the
hanging out in
entire
city
hearing,
council chambers with you.
there. Madam Secretary? roll
So
call.
enjoyable.
Hines,
Aye.
Cashman,
Aye.
Kinich. Aye. Ortega. Aye. Sandoval. Aye.
I guess the fair election's fun. Didn't count.
Sawyer.
Yeah.
Aye. Torres.
It did.
Aye.
I made some calls on that. So that's
Black.
good.
Aye. DeVaca. Aye. Clark. Flynn.
Aye.
Herndon.
Aye.
Madam President.
Aye. Madam Secretary, please close the voting and announce the results.
13 ayes.
13 ayes, Council Bill 929 has passed. Next up on our agenda is the mayor's proposed 2021 budget. The public hearing for the mayor's proposed 2021 budget is open. May we have the staff report, please? And we have Stephanie Adams here with us.
Oh.
Good evening, I'm gonna.
That's why we're here, folks.
Share my screen, okay. Good evening, council. I'm gonna try to be brief. I just wanna make sure that I provide people with a little bit of context. I know tonight is really about listening to the public, to share their thoughts. Okay. So.
If it was, there would be a council here to hear us.
And the privilege of serving as the city, County Denver's budget management director. I just put together a couple slides. These slides actually come directly from the city council meeting for the most part. And I'll point
There's
out
more
where
than
they don't.
six, so
So
more
this-
than not a couple.
A much larger.
Lynn's
slide
already
deck is
lying.
Available on the Department of Finance's website as well as city council. So let's just roll through a couple of these slides. So this is the Denver economic model. This is a pretty key component in terms of recognizing and understanding how we have developed both the 2020 projections as well as our 2021 budget. So just three quick things to show you on this slide. The first is that gray bar is really what would have happened, we believe, had we not been hit with a worldwide pandemic. The green recovery model for our projected core and sales use tax is what we have built our 2020 projections and our 2020 budget on. It's really important for you to see that red line, which means that we have not based any of our 2020 projections or 2021 projections on a virus resurgence. We do have a lot of economic indicators that we monitor, and that those are explained in totality in the presentation to City Council from September 17th. But to give you a flavor, we're looking at unemployment data, business openings and activities, as well as tourism-related activity as well. So let's start with the revenue. And before we can talk about 2021 revenue, what we really need to do is start with 2020 revenue. That's what we'll build our base on. It's important to know that for 2020, our current revised projection is about $220 million below what our original projection was. This is pretty historic in terms of the amount of loss in 1 year. I do have a visual in the next slide that will show you how this year and
Just a few
next year
slides.
compares to our previous history. So what
Let's talk about how
2021 is based on is
$50,000 per,
$1.328 billion budget. That is about a
That's part of
5%
that.
growth. But you'll see that's off a pretty depressed base. I do list out some of the major contributors to the revenue loss as well as the revenue growth for 2021. Essentially, the punchline is that there are lots of things in both sides of the slide. There are some, we know that things like tourism activity is significantly down. That contributes to both sales tax and lodgers tax, and we hope a lot of those things will bounce back and grow the following year. that even in some of our toughest years, like 2009, very slow growth in 2008, it doesn't quite compare to 2020 and what we're seeing in terms of that 10%. Can you see all the way to the side?
It might be helpful, Stephanie, I was gonna interrupt you, but then, could we get you to go to the full presentation mode, so?
I clicked on it a couple times, and it's ignoring me.
All right.
Okay. Present online, maybe that will work.
No,
Nope.
that uses
Right.
Teams.
We might just have you increase.
How about from current slide?
At the bottom.
Oh my God, it's the second button. It says from current slide. It's really hard to
My
see,
team
folks.
is trying to text me right now.
Right there, from current slide.
Click on the bottom right-hand side. Okay, well, listen, I'm gonna try to sort of move it over maybe. Does that help a little?
There you go, yep.
All right, so let's, on to the next slide.
You had one job, lady. It was to present the budget. You're doing a great job.
So now we're gonna talk a little bit about expenditures and some of the guidelines that we use when we worked on developing expenditures for 2021. And so the first thing that all of you are well aware of is that we are by charter required to have a balanced budget. So for those of you watching, that means we cannot have expenditures that exceed our revenue. Additionally, what you'll find is both 2020 and 2021 are built to make sure that we have about 12%, we have a 12% undesignated fund balance. And that is, as many of you know, our floor is 10%. This is a 12% because we recognize, again, going back to the earlier slide, we're not budgeting based on a resurgence. Should something like that happen, should our revenues, there's something unforeseen, which has been sort of the theme of 2020, we want to make sure we have a little bit of cushion in our undesignated fund balance, because that is the one thing that makes up when our revenue is not where we hoped it would be, or projected. We also work very hard with our Office of Equity to mitigate equity impacts and make sure that we're not making decisions that may disproportionately impact our historically marginalized communities. So they reviewed a lot of our decisions and guided us on some of those. We also worked hard to minimize impact to our employees. Certainly our employees will feel some of these impacts, like furlough days, which I'll mention in a minute. But we recognize that our employees actually are the ones who deliver the service to our community. And we recognize that we're trying to avoid layoffs, because we know that actually compounds some of the challenges in our community. You saw from our economic model that model transcends 2020 and 2021 and goes into 2022. And so it's really important, as we thought through the changes that we're making to our 2021 budget, that we recognize that some of those things can't be temporary. We cannot do all temporary reductions because it will take us some time to recover. And then finally, we, and certainly not least, we really work to avoid any kind of service impacts to our community to the best of our ability. Okay, so just remember somebody else run the slides for me, so I apologize. I'm just going to briefly touch on some of the key reductions for 2021. Normally this is the part in my presentation where I actually share the expansions. But this is really important for us to talk about the reductions that we had to take for 2021. So one of the most important pieces is I talk about how we have employees who deliver our services. The 2021 budget reflects 400 fewer career service staff budget. So these were all vacant positions that agencies offered up. They were vacant this year, and we're going to hold them vacant for 2021. We have traditionally done a transfer to our capital improvement program, and we won't be able to do that for 2021. This is in blue. This was not on your key reduction slide when we did the city council presentation. It was on a different slide, and I tried to consolidate them. We do, in order to balance our budget for 2021, are counting on about $13.5 million in additional savings that we had anticipated getting as part of the collective bargaining agreements. Clearly, if that is not achieved, we will have to go back and seek some additional reductions in 2022. Our safety agencies offered up about $13.8 million in specific savings around overtime and reduced recruit classes. We are counting also on about $3.2 million contingent upon a lower jail population for 2021, but one that was similar to what we've experienced in 2020. I don't want to get through all of these, but just to know there's some other places where we really pulled back, including moving expenditures associated with capital projects to capital projects. When we change the source of that expenditure, it will continue to occur. So let me move us through. Although I'm happy if you, something I didn't cover that you wanted some clarity on, I'm happy to do that. This is really important to also note is that even in a reduction year, we recognize there had to be some budget increases. The City and County of Denver's budget philosophy has always been, we have never made cuts across the board, we have never made expansions across the board. And in 2021, what you'll find in the budget is that we actually, in the midst of cutting, also made decisions in our budget to actually increase investments to address some of our community members, including additional dollars for a new shelter, providing additional funding for homeless outreach resources. We will have our first full year of the new Solutions Center for 2021. My understanding is they will be fully implemented in January. We also have identified about $3 million to increase the investment in the property tax rebate program to provide some support to TANF families in terms of cash support. We are increasing our support around eviction assistance. This next bullet is blue because as part of City Council's request, they asked us to increase funding for the STAR program, which we did. We identified some additional dollars. We identified dollars in our budget that we thought we could redirect to the STAR program. I didn't mention this here, but one of the other requests that City Council made was to move this program where we had originally budgeted 911 and move it to DDPHE. We did that in the October book, so both increased it as well as moved it to align with City Council's request. We also had some places where with a new parkland, we're making sure that our rec centers can have the funding that they need to open fully next year. We're investing in that as well. We know that we're facing some challenges around some of the youth violence challenges in our community, and we added about $500,000 to the Office of Children's Affairs to help distribute dollars into the community to address that. I know you had quite a few speakers earlier about the Immigration Legal Defense Fund, and we actually increased dollars, so that is an additional $300,000 to the $200,000 that they have, so about $500,000 now for the Immigration Legal Defense Fund. We increased dollars for the Colorado Convention Center, and then because we recognize some of the challenges that we might be facing in terms of tourism. We had some other mandatory expansions that we needed to invest in for 2021 in terms of some of our legal obligations. And finally, we did invest and continue to invest in our commitment to the employee retirement program for 2021, both in terms of an increased contribution that was expected from our employees. We shifted to the employer, that would be us. And then we also recognized that we needed to address and backfill some of the unfunded liability as a result of our incentive program for our retirees. And let's see, let's go. I have 2 more slides, so let's get to okay, so just 2 more slides on our capital improvement program. Previously I showed some of the revenue coming into the general fund. I wanted to provide you some overview of the revenues coming into our capital improvement program. And so I mentioned that we were not providing the general fund transfer. And so this gray bar in the general fund transfer that we historically provided to the capital improvement fund, you can see that that is a significant portion of why you will see that in 2021 there is a reduction of about 13% in terms of revenue. All right, last slide. Since we did highlight a couple of the operating investments for 2021, I also wanted to provide a little bit of some of the project highlights for 2021, and that includes a continued commitment to transportation and mobility, including sidewalks and Denver Moves. And then our parks We'll be investing in everything from Heron Pond and some South Platte River reconstruction, all the way through the Montbello Elk Learning Center as well. We are investing in some facilities investments, including some physical security improvements to our city-owned buildings, courtroom improvements, and as well as the 7th Avenue Maintenance Facility. And really important to talk a little bit about the additional investment we're making in ADA improvements. This is $3 million. We have an additional $2 million in operating funds to address and make sure that we can be as ADA compliant as we can be. Okay. And I think that is it. Thank you for dealing with my technical difficulties.
No worries. Thank you, Stephanie, for working with us. And we appreciate that.
Rotate
have
the babysitters.
tonight 24 speakers signed up. And so we will go ahead and start. And then after we have heard from our speakers, we'll have questions from members of council. And just want to remind the folks who are speaking that you're going to have 3 minutes. But if you feel like you're repeating what other folks are saying, we ask you to make your remarks brief, because we do have another public hearing after this one. And so our first speaker is Owen Perkins. It looks like we don't have Owen, so we're going to move to Thomas Brooke. You might need to unmute yourself, Thomas.
Yes, good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you this evening. I know you've had a long meeting, and I appreciate the difficulty of your budget cuts. I want to open by thanking you and the council and the city of Denver for their long-term support and engagement with the Denver South Transportation Management Association, which I am the CEO of. We appreciate the efforts of Councilmember Black and the Denver Council to reinstate Denver's financial support for TMA dues for the 2021 budget. Denver South represents the I-25 corridor from I-225 in the DTC down south to Ridgegate Parkway in Lone Tree and Douglas County. With representation from 6 jurisdictional governments and the business community of the Denver South TMA has worked diligently to improve traffic in the region, from early funding and lobbying for the light rail in conjunction with T-Rex, with significant efforts furthering multimodal transportation options, such as our recent funding of a $5 million project on the key stretch of the north-south bike lane connectivity parallel I-25, to our significant corporate outreach and education and transportation options, to our 2020 grand prize winner of the support for teleworking. Traffic and environmental impacts do not stop at the jurisdiction borders. Watching I-25, you can see the significant movement of traffic in both directions as residents and employees of all regions commute into jobs in the central business district, as well as in the Denver South region, which is home to over 45 million square feet of office space and nearly 250,000 jobs. Now, we appreciate, particularly after the last several hours, that there are no easy budget cuts and no stone can be left unturned. This relatively small amount of money supports tremendous work in the area of traffic mitigation and air quality improvements, which are critical as we face an almost certain downgrade to the severe classification under the Clean Air Act. The ability to work collaboratively to address these issues with Denver and the other jurisdictions, as well as other TMAs, provides tremendous leverage in addressing these issues that are of vital importance to our communities. In this case, a small amount of payment now can potentially avoid a much larger. Again, thank you for your support. Thank you for your time this evening. Thank you for considering the reinstatement of the TMA dues.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Tanya Wilson.
Hi, I'm here.
There you go.
Thank you, thank you. Yes, my name is Tanya Wilson. I live in District 4. My husband and I have lived in Denver for over 20 years, and until recently have thoroughly enjoyed our time here. However, and for a number of reasons, Denver has taken a turn for the worse. Over this past summer, we've been woken up by the sound of gunshots and the roar of cars, street racing through southeast Denver. Our neighbors have had their homes and vehicles burglarized. Profane and gang graffiti has been popping up all around the area, creating a game of whack-a-mole for our Denver 311 system. Some other speakers tonight and in prior weeks talked about defunding the Denver Police Department. My husband and I are part of that Denver majority, that 60% of Denver residents who actually want to see more police presence in all of our neighborhoods. I'm guessing many of you have been downtown recently, and the damage to the private and public buildings is despicable and costly to business owners, tenants, property owners, and taxpayers. It's hateful graffiti and boarded up buildings that make our city look like a war zone and make people uncomfortable coming to their places of work, my husband being one of them. A good friend of ours has been with the DPD for 20 years. He's currently a sergeant with the homeless outreach team in District 6 downtown. Homelessness is a huge problem in Denver, and defunding the police will only make it worse, both from enforcement and outreach perspectives. We spoke to this friend last night. Police officers are not addiction specialists. They are not mental health professionals. They enforce the law that Denver voters voted for, and that's why they're there. And their job is to enforce those laws. In the absence of a police department, the co-responders with the specific skills around addiction and mental health, who normally accompany officers, they wouldn't have the opportunity to help those in need. The Denver Police Department has increased its efforts to be progressive, inclusive, and representative of the people. We've seen that not just from our friend, but also from our community resource officer here in Southeast Denver and the police on the street. We need to feel safe. Defunding the DPD will not help that cause whatsoever. Crime rates and destruction in Denver cannot go up. Please do not fund the Denver Police Department. Please preserve the budget they have. Thank you, Tanya and John Wilson.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Gregory Verzosa.
Everyone, my name is Greg, and I'm in District 8. First and foremost, I want to thank all of you for the work you've done on the 2021 budget.
He's putting
As
it
we move
in
into the final weeks of the approval process.
Playing with his pussy.
I understand that it's been far from easy, given the circumstances we're facing. After reviewing the amendments you submitted, I'm elated that it's clear that you're listening to what we want.
No, that's a cat.
No, it's a dog, it's a puppy.
In the response from the mayor's office, where funding is being reallocated from, and the length we are willing to go to address these urgent issues. I hope you will consider the testimonies being brought forth by the committee members this evening and from all previous meetings, and ask yourselves whether the budget really lives up to the values we wish to model during this difficult time. Given the number of ballot measures many of you have championed that chip away at the powers of the mayor's office, I implore you to continue down this path and push for more accountability. If the voters decide to give you that oversight next week, you can start doing that now by taking ownership of the 2021 budget, submitting more amendments before next week that ultimately defund DPD to fund these priorities, and uniting to stand firm against anything rejected by the mayor. Collectively, you all received more votes in 2019 than the mayoral race. I appreciate that funding for STAR has been increased, but if I recall correctly, Councilor Sawyer did the math and extrapolated the amount needed to expand it to meet the size of our population. And the budget for it is still $1 million short of that mark. I keep hearing that we have to temper our support for a pilot program, but the program is modeled after, has been in effect long enough that the efficacy is exactly up for debate. It only makes sense to me that policing alternatives, which ultimately have saved time,
Probably buy less chemical agencies on our citizens.
coming directly from the DPE budget. I understand the program in which funding for it originated has a surplus, but as we go into these colder months under quarantine, I wonder if those funds could be utilized to find creative ways to keep our communities connected at a time when physical interaction becomes impossible.
Less tear gas, less pepper balls,
But let's invest in creating content for
less OC spray.
available remotely through the Parks Department. I'm also happy that funding is being moved to legal aid for eviction defense, but implore you to invest in the interventions that take place before people are in the court system, which is ultimately less attacked. I find it incredibly frustrating that we have yet to find out the exact cost of sweeping encampments for many of the departments involved. I look forward to the auditor's report next year.
You put that around our,
I don't recall anyone asking for it to run fair elections.
I'll grab the tripod and
I
go
hope
in
the
front.
turnout this evening
for sure.
But I'm letting them.
Yeah. So you're gonna set up the stand at the podium.
Volunteering to provide services and support for the city as well. If you that's your turn.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Up next, we have Ian Tafoya.
Okay. I love you. I've heard of him.
I had a chance to review several of these things in the books, and I would agree that you are listening. You know, this rental registry, I think it's amazing. Do we need a full stakeholder process to collect and delay it? I'm not quite so sure. I believe that there's been a lot of work done so far, and I think delaying that longer and paying high cost to facilitators just doesn't make a lot of sense. I see here youth violence. Again, I wonder, do we need another violence table with a high-paid consultant to facilitate? We know it works. Parents at home, not in jail. Latchkey kids not being latchkey kids because of low living wages, and their parents having to be there. Housing insecurity, education and programs. I appreciate that. You know, in regards to the public restrooms, I agree with Councilwoman Kinich about that $80 million budget they could find it. Well, let's be honest, you've built hardly any in a few years. They benefit our water quality, they help business districts do better because public restrooms exist. Most of all, they're a human right. I also think when it comes to trash disposal in the parks, I know they're cutting staff. I think you should invest in volunteer coordinators that can organize efforts with less overhead and bring people to the table. As far as STAR funding goes, yes, we need to increase STAR funding. We can get that off, and it should come from the DPP. I do want to say the Citizen Oversight Board, also because it has oversight of the Department of Safety, they should be taking that. It is their oversight. As far as forestry goes, I think we need to be thinking as these fires are getting worse, how we're preparing. You know, Green New Deal type programs in the mountain parks is how they built Red Rocks, I'm just saying. But the last thing I really want to say is, I heard a lot of talk tonight about bonds and lowering costs and financial decisions. If I can be quite frank, the best decision we can make for the future is a public bank. We could fund our own Green New Deal for Denver, we could support housing, youth programs, entrepreneurship, and lower bond ratings than we would ever get on open market where our wealth is being transferred to Wall Street. So with that in mind, I want to thank you for pushing back with the mayor's office right now, and for pushing back on the Fair Election Fund, because we can find these from other departments, and I just listed some. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Stuart Anderson.
Hello, I'm Stuart Anderson, 1041 Marion Street in Denver. I'm speaking on behalf of maintaining the funding for our transportation and management associations. The City and County of Denver, in cooperation with Denver Regional Council of Governments and the Regional Air Quality Council, formed these programs together as a public-private partnership to engage employers and developers in looking at transportation in ways other than just the car. We are actively promoting the use of bus. We facilitate carpools and van pools. Currently, our biggest project is a program called Telework Tomorrow, where we're actually helping employers develop formalized telework programs so they can continue to have their employees work from home at least part-time after this crisis. And we're working with the governor's office on a grant program that they have set up to help employers develop these telework programs. We're really on the front lines helping people get around, and our services are more needed today than ever before. We've been out passing out masks and sanitizer for bus riders, educating employers and their staff about ways to get around in a safe manner, helping them set up successful telework programs and to continue. The challenge that we have and the benefit is that we are able to apply for federal funds because we are designated transportation management associations, funds that some of these funds are not even accessible to the city of Denver. What we do with the $35,000 that's provided to us annually from the city and county of Denver is we apply for federal grants. We multiply that $35,000 into $175,000 worth of projects that are spent mostly in the city of Denver, but also Glendale and portions of unincorporated Arapahoe County. These grants come in 2-year cycles. We're ending year 1. And our partner on this, the City and County of Denver, that signed off on our grant and wrote us a glorious letter of support, is pulling our funding in year 2 of the grant. That means we're not just foregoing $35,000, we're foregoing $175,000 worth of funding. We are currently, my program, Transportation Solutions, is studying redesigning 3 of our rail stations this year, and include Yale, Southmore, and project is at risk if the city pulls these funds. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. We have Andrew Block up next.
Hello, and thank you for 3 more minutes of your time. It's far more than any single citizen of our city deserves. Earlier today, I talked about political inequality, and it's hard to ignore that reality now. I live in a world that places an exorbitant value on my skin, gender, and social class. The privilege of a phenomenal public school system, financial stability, never fearing a destructive criminal justice system. My ability to be here tonight depends on all of it and more. In 2006, I've heard $65,000 for my education because I was so unflinchingly confident that the American economy had a 6-figure role for me. I can't imagine what my students on Federal Boulevard would think of that arrogance. It makes you think about a lot of the assumptions and preconceived notions that shape our lives, our thinking, and our decisions. It was really striking earlier hearing the ease with which some council members invoked fiscal responsibility in their efforts to defund a relatively small sum for fair elections. I never hear phrases like unprecedented budget crisis when those members speak of police, even though it's nowhere more relevant than in our discussions of criminal justice. I wonder which assumptions shape those remarks. We can choose to use hundreds of millions of public safety dollars to prevent crime or perpetuate it. Contrary to popular wisdom, the institution of police perpetuates crime. Research is clear that the 4 primary drivers of violent crime are isolation, loss of dignity, family disruption, and an inability to meet one's economic needs, and that these are all features of the American conception of public safety. Denver families are being swallowed by poverty, and the mayor's budget is a conscious choice to fund their incarceration. They don't have phenomenal public schools or financial stability, and a criminal record deprives families of housing and economic opportunities for the rest of their lives. It traps them in generational poverty. It is perpetuating crime and inequality in a time of crisis. As a classroom teacher in a 2-tiered education system, I'm watching it happen in real time. In 2014, NYPD was furious at Mayor de Blasio for creating a hostile anti-police environment in the city. Unable to strike, officers collectively implemented a work slowdown, refusing to arrest or ticket people for, quote, minor offenses. If you're wondering exactly what that means, protesting police said that they would make arrests, quote, only when they have to, and arrests plunged 66%. Let that sink in for a moment. 2/3 of the arrests in New York City funneled people into all of the circumstances that lead to violent crime for no good reason at all. Embarrassed New York police resumed work quickly and quietly. We don't have the benefit of such a clean social experiment in Denver, but it's clear why the overwhelming majority of Americans believe that mass incarceration is counterproductive to public safety. It is. In that light, I would like to address Councilwoman Ortega's poll numbers for a moment. I've done grant work before, and I know how easy it is to make numbers say what you want them to. She chose a very prescribed survey question would produce a predictably contrived result. Plain fact remains that fully 71% of the American public believes that mass incarceration is a counterproductive use of public resources, which is in line with the research about punishment models of criminal justice. Please don't fund it. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Steve Erickson.
Well, thank you, Madam President and members of council. Good evening. I'm Steve Erickson, and I'm the Communications and Marketing Director at the Denver Regional Council of Governments, Dr. Cobb. And in that role, I oversee the Way to Go program. Way to Go is a partnership between Dr. Cobb and 7 transportation management associations or TMAs in the region. And I'm proud to say that the collaborative work we do is
It's like all white. It's like the whitest thing ever.
Excellence. The goal of our program, of course, is to reduce traffic congestion and improve air quality by getting people out of those single occupant vehicles and using other modes to get around the region. Our specific program goals to reduce vehicle miles traveled per capita and SOV share come down directly from Metro Vision, which is our region's plan for growth and development. These goals, of course, closely align with the city's mobility goals as well. I really just wanted to take this brief time to speak to you about the importance of these organizations, the TMAs, in our mobility ecosystem. Healthy TMAs are absolutely vital to our continued success in fighting traffic congestion and improving air quality. Finally, let me just express my gratitude to the city and county of Denver for many years of financial support for our TMA partners. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jennifer Dillon.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Dillon, Council District 8. Thank you for allowing me this time to be heard.
demonstrably safer. Things like housing supports for our homeless neighbors, low-income housing, mental health services, youth programs, etc. The mayor's budget increases the funding for the STAR program, which diverts 911 calls that pertain to substance abuse, mental health, or people who just need connected to services away from our police response and to Denver Health paramedics and social workers from the mental health center instead. This is a really exciting program. It's worthy of investment, and I wish the mayor had chosen to fund it to the level that the city council requested. The STAR program essentially reduces the workload of the DPD, so my question is, why aren't the funds for this program being pulled from the police budget? That doesn't make any sense. Funding the STAR program with money outside of the police budget, in effect, increases the police budget, as they now have fewer responsibilities and no corresponding decrease in funding. This is not what we meant when we said reimagine policing. It's distressing that the mayor, Councilman Flynn, my own representative, and others on the council saw no issue with raiding the fair election fund, and I think that says a lot about how their priorities are misaligned with what the voters prioritize. As this fund passed with an overwhelming 71% of the vote. I'm glad this plan has been put on the back burner for now. Democracy is under serious threat in our country at present, and we should be doing whatever possible to strengthen pro-democracy reforms like the Fair Election Fund and not weakening them. The money for programs like the STAR program, eviction defense, should be coming from the police budget. We can invest police dollars in the kind of community support programs that reduce crime and make our community safer and more resilient. We can invest in housing support, mental health services, substance abuse programs, schools, jobs, creative things that meaningfully address poverty and other root causes of crime. Thanks.
Thank you. Next up, we have Andrew Eltis.
Yep, you got it. Thank you, Madam President and Council, for your time tonight and for allowing me to have a couple minutes. My name is Andrew Eltis. I am the director of the Downtown Denver TMA and a Denver resident as well. I'm speaking on behalf of the budget that supports active transportation improvements as well as TMA funding in Denver. I'll start by saying that the city has some ambitious but attainable mobility targets as stated in the Mobility Action Plan, aimed at reducing congestion, air quality, improving air quality, and increasing access to safe and affordable mobility. These goals call for a shift from over 70% of single-occupant vehicle commuter travel to 50%, and an increase of people biking and walking and using transit. And as a transportation professional, I'll tell you that to create that shift in travel behavior, you need two things. You need a well-functioning alternative transportation system, and you need public encouragement and support programs that the TMAs offer and Way to Go offers to help educate people about access and how to utilize those mobility alternatives. We need the TMAs across the city who understand how to access the community to help build interest and engagement in mobility programs that the city provides, and to give information to support those to the community with to safe and reliable and affordable transportation options. Fast forward to COVID-19, the world of remote working. It could be easy for us to say, for so many people working from home, why do we need organization? My answer to this has two parts. First and most important, we have a very high number of essential and hospitality workers, particularly downtown, that rely on mobility network for daily commuting. And the work that the TMA supports all businesses, large and small, commuting to and through our center city with increased mobility access. We help businesses by providing equitable and inclusive mobility benefits that support teleworkers and people traveling to the city alike. Lastly, this is my last point, at some point in the future, we're going to see a large number of employers returning to work. And let's just say we maintain that 40% transit ridership that we have right now. This would mean that 63,000 daily trips to and from downtown would need to be accommodated by some other mode. If all those people chose to drive, that could be an additional 1.3 million trips, vehicle miles traveled, 1.3 million
don't go to bed till
it's
like 3 or
critical
4.
that we continue
I get up
to
at
provide
that
these
time.
services,
That's fair.
both in active
Right,
transportation
fine.
funding that you have in the budget, as well as the CMA support. Thank you for the work you've done on this budget, and wish you a great year.
Thank you. Our next speaker up is Katie Blakey.
My name is Katie Blakey, and I'm a homeowner in Capitol Hill. First off, I want to say thank you so much to the members of council who voted no on Bill 20-1194. One of the biggest powers City Council wields is through the budget, and I really appreciate all the ideas you all brought forward during the budget deliberations during this difficult time. The amendments you proposed will help the city to chip away at some of the biggest issues we face, including a mental health crisis and housing. But the amendments aren't enough. Our unhoused neighbors are dying in our streets while the city mercilessly continues sweeps. DDPHE is cutting $500,000 from mental health treatment and substance use prevention programs. As our crucial city agencies fight for scraps, the Department of Safety's budget remains bloated, and the agencies that fall under it resist any attempt at accountability for their outsized portion of our budget. Like many others, I watched in Fourth this summer as the Denver Police Department beat, shot, and tear gassed my neighbors and local journalists without consequence, and later learned that they spent $384,000 on those munitions. As many of you have heard, the budget is a world document. What does it say about our city when, during a pandemic, we've dedicated nearly half of it to repressive, violent agencies while we allow more and more Denverites to slip into poverty? Please continue to fight for us and push for sensible reductions to the Department of Safety budget in order to fund the services that help the public, will actually keep our community safe and healthy. I know the mayor's office still hasn't explained the $366,000 that Councilman Penich's team found that's unaccounted for in the Department of Safety budget. If y'all could keep working to get an answer for what that money is for, that would be awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Alejo Gonzalez.
There's only 20 some of us, folks. Be
Thank you
patient.
for your time, City Council. My name is Alejo Gonzalez, and I'm from Walsh Park, in District 7. I am a proud son of Spanish and Chilean immigrants, a precinct captain of the Democratic Party, a union organizer, a union member.
Sorry, what
and
did you
members
cook?
of calls and voters for the historical election on November 3rd. I'm here to comment on the budget, but first, I would like to
What?
restrictions.
Clorox?
The idea of taking away funding from the fair election fund, and then to complicate the vital public comment day of is nothing short of betrayal and silencing of your constituents. Supporting this premise, it looks like you want to defund your future competition, who have the working people's platform in mind, so special interests can continue to have an upper hand over us. I am proud of the decision made tonight to not take away funds from FEF and hope this decision is upheld. You've heard the community plead for moving money from the massive police budget to make up for the shortfalls due to COVID, but are actively choosing against this anyway. While every other worker in the city is terrified of losing their job, furlough already, not have guaranteed raises, and bringing COVID back home to their loved ones, us workers are watching you give preferential treatment to the police force that brutalized us all summer while leaving the rest of us behind. Don't tokenize workers that support an anti-worker agenda, and don't punish us for speaking up by making it hard to challenge. There are other sources in the city, like this ridiculous police budget, and using some random poll tonight to discredit one of the largest social upheavals in the history of our country is shameful and out of touch.
Say it,
I ask,
comrade.
how
Say
many
it.
dead Black and brown bodies will you endorse by continuing to overinflate the police budget? How many BIPOC families have to continue to live in fear under your approved militarized police force? I'm asking for justice by bringing amendments next week to move money from the surplus Denver Police Department and refund the workers of Denver. I invite you to please listen to your constituents and stand up against unilateral decisions from this mayor's office. Join myself and other union and non-union workers in the city who are fighting for a future that can care for us and our loved ones regardless of the color of our skin. That invite is open to all of you. Those of you who think that you don't have to listen to us and that you don't have to stand up for working people, see you in 2023. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, we have Maddie Hughes.
Hello, my name is Maddie Hughes, and I'm a resident of District 10 with Chris Hines. And I first want to say thank you for providing this public comment section. And I've been waiting 4.5 hours to talk, so please listen. So first, I wanted to touch on something
I heard from Councilwoman Ortega earlier tonight, which raised a few eyebrows, I think, and she said that there was only 16% of Denverites who want to see the police defunded or to see the police less in their communities. I'm not sure what poll she was referencing.
You babysitter.
And I also do understand that all of you have the challenge of listening to polarized groups at this moment in history. And I understand that you want to represent your constituents fairly, but also I really want to remind you that this is your time to get involved in the discussion and develop your own perspectives from having discussions with your community. This is a human rights crisis. Maybe others aren't aware, but many people don't have the privilege to stay unaware of it. And so I invite you and implore you to have these conversations with your community, whatever platforms you have, and in particular with minorities and the poor people in your communities, because those are the people affected by police brutality, if you didn't know. But now I'm going to ask you to, once again, to defund DPD as much as you can. I understand a revolution can't happen overnight, but like someone mentioned before, push for amendments that take funding away from DPD. And it's an issue that intersects with the artificial problem of homelessness in our city. I first want to say that homelessness is not a natural problem. It is a direct result of the racist and oppressive capitalist economy under which we live. If we would approve a shift in our budget to get our unhoused population the shelter, health care, and meet their other needs, it would not be a problem. But instead, we are stuck in the brainwashed, unprogressive belief that we need a police force to terrorize, and I don't use that word lightly, our unhoused neighbors and quote-unquote sweep them from place to place like they are not human. Why can't we at least spend money on sanitation, porta potties, and trash services for those community members while dozens of empty apartments sit in the city available for them? And I want to urge you for this reason and so many others that would take me hours to recite to reject the mayor's budget proposal and reallocate the funds for police to social services, mental health services, education, and youth programs. Thank you, and that's all I have.
Thank you. We have Jamie Landa up next.
Hi, my name is Jamie, and I'm a Denver resident living in Council District 7. I first want to thank the majority of City Council for declining to raise the fair election fund. When looking for where to take those needed funds from, the obvious answer is the police department. In March, many of us have shown up to public comment urging City Council to amend Mayor Hancock's budget to move funding from the overinflated police budget to the things that actually keep our community safe, like affordable housing, support for our unhoused neighbors, and alternatives to policing. The police do not make us safe. In fact, for our unhoused neighbors and communities of color, the police routinely inflict violence. Do the right thing and use the excessive police funding to invest in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Amber Verzosa up next.
Hi, City Council. Thank you for allowing us to have public comment tonight. I am Amber Verzosa and I live in District 8. As a social worker, I've seen firsthand what our police are able and trained to handle and what they are not. I've worked with detectives who worked diligently to develop a case against a child trafficker. I've seen them create relationships with victims and support them, helping the victim of sex trafficking be safer. I've also worked with individuals with significant mental health conditions who've had breakdowns, and the only resource their family felt like they had was to keep them and their loved ones safe was the police, who showed up with guns and furthered a mental health crisis. Year after year, Denver Police Department's budget continues to grow, and many initiatives that support our communities go unfunded. I appreciate the City Council's efforts to fund mental health, unhoused initiatives, the STARS initiative, and others to support our community. Unfortunately, in this current budget proposal, that has all come at the cost of the well-supported fund of fair elections. This election season, when I have been contacted by campaigns asking for my support, I can only sigh and say I wish I didn't have to vote for another white male. I want a representative democracy to look like my community, to see all people serving in public office. I I want to be able to tell the youth I work with that yes, they too could hold office, that they can make decisions about their future. And as many of you know, this fund was one small step towards that future. As you continue to work with the mayor's office on the 2021 budget, I implore you to think about what our communities need, especially during these unprecedented times. Working with low-income individuals, I know that they are in need of supports to keep them in their houses, help to find affordable housing, obtain mental health support, and supportive schools that have the capacity to understand them and their children and not just to label them as difficult. I was recently listening to a news article by NPR this morning that was saying that the American Psychological Association has named, in their stress report, has named that 2020 has been the most stressful year for people in the United States. That means that we will need mental health support going forward, and we don't need police who don't know how to manage mental health support. I ask for you all to take a stand tonight and reduce the Denver Police budget, the Denver Police Department's budget, who are doing work that they are not trained to do, instead of taking away from money and from a future and a true representative democracy. Thank you so much for your time.
If this is a representative sample, 100% of people want to defund the police. So this just doesn't care that much.
Hi, my name is Jessica Russell. I live in Denver, down near DU, and I am one of the many people urging you this evening to defund the police and invest our taxpayer dollars in priorities that actually keep our communities safer. We know that every dollar spent for education towards low-income houses.
That's the babysitter.
Feeding children who are suffering from lack of access to healthy food or good food. All of these things are things that reduce crime and poverty and keep our communities safer. I would also ask that the police.
Do you want a block member behind you?
Okay, yeah, you want to stand over here, that's fine. Stand right here, it's even better because then the council will see it.
Destroying their blankets and the things that keep them safe, and the weather we're having right now is violent. There is no other way to look at it. Homelessness is a problem because we do nothing to help these people. They are suffering.
My underarms
These
are
are
yards.
the things that would keep your neighborhoods feel better would be things like access to a place to wash, a place to use the restroom with dignity, places where they can keep their belongings when they went out and found a job, instead of having to carry everything they own with them at all times with no address and no access to an address to put on an application or a resume. These are things that contribute to a cycle of poverty that are so insurmountable, and they're all things that could easily be addressed if we allocated resources away from the bloated DPD budget and towards community resources that would actually help these people and break this cycle. Many people have spoken much more eloquently than I can, but there are a lot of people out here, way more than 16%, that would like you to do things that would actually make this community safe for all of us, no matter what it looks like. Thank you for your time this evening, and please consider funding again the things that will help our community.
Yeah, that's me. Hi. Let's fix this like this. Good evening, council. I don't know where you're at, how you're legally holding a meeting when none of you are physically present to face your employers, the constituents who represent you. Because we're here in this building so we can look you in the eye and say, yeah, you're really not doing a good job with this budget if we're not defunding the police. Gotta defund them once in a while, but not too much, okay? Some of the things that I'm looking at in this budget that really concern me. One of those is the liabilities claims budget, when it's going down from $5 million to $2 million, when we know that there's at least another $3 million in claims that occurred in the first week of protests in this year alone. It just blows my mind. okay? Now, I'm reading the 800 pages of the Denver city budget, which is, I don't know, just pretty dang extensive. And another one of the things that came into my mind was the transfer of civilian jobs to police officer jobs. So, like, while it looks like we're cutting all of these police officers in the budget, many of them who are civilians are being moved into gun-carrying badged roles. That's not a defunding of the police department. And it's not utilizing the money for services that our suburban neighbors recognize keep people from criminal behavior and lifestyle practices, after-school programs, mental health services. Toilets! This building that I'm standing in today was built with water outside for your public to drink. And now there's not water, there's not toilets, there are people dying. Meanwhile, none of you are here. And I've had 4 cops in and out of this room to babysit us. It's an overuse of policing and an inaccurate use of Denver money. It's time to get it right. Okay? Are you hearing me? Because these security guards are not armed. They're not here for the fun and games. They're here to show you that Denver residents want an end to the violence in the city. We want an end to the brutality by police. And we want an end to the urban camping ban, a law that was not voted on. It was created by Denver City Council. And now you're killing and prosecuting and persecuting people on the streets. And this budget is a continuation of that unjust and unlawful persecution of your constituents. Have a nice day. Perfect. That was great. I could have done it better without you. Appreciate it. You look great on screen too. Everybody's got to be rolling and laughing. That was beautiful.
Fuck the police.
Four babysitters. Oh. I don't know. Hey guys, we're really done with council. I got nothing else to do here. Have a good night. Have a good night. Thanks.
Hey, stay warm in your house, okay?
That was fun. Oh my God, I almost forgot my jacket. My bodyguard's here, they're not armed. Door not open over here? What about the back gate that y'all came in and out of? Is that not open over here? Thank you. Tell me what to do. That's it. Hold on. That's okay. Let me close myself off the back here. to walk forward on that side and then walk left. Right? I'm gonna walk like this up here to my car. But I just took the voice driving. I'm sorry. Let's go on this side. This time. Okay. And that's it. I do have to moment. I go through like the way you start up to the right?
Yeah. And that's the deal.
Oh, okay. I go through 5 years. That's something now. Yeah, that was totally worth it. But it's fun because at first I was just like calm and I want to get into the water. I can't even look these people in the eye. So, you want to come in the house and do that? How about you? You guys really want to put me around and see my there you are. At the very end, when I had like a second left, I'm like, thank you, have a nice day.
A guy just got on to say fuck you to everybody.
She knows. She knows.
Good point, Tom.
And with nobody in the room, that room really gets loud. Car coming.
You really resonate.
and I'm gonna be sad looking at all this fucking homeless out here. Alright, we'll do it again. Next time, not so boring at council. Always. Alright, man.